I'm Steve Gilman, and this is Brand Story, where we help you build stronger, more sustainable brands by sharing insightful conversations with brand leaders, marketers, and professional storytellers. My guest today is John McNeil.
Experience is the new brand. Like that at the end of the day, what you're trying to do, and you said it really well, is you're trying to connect with humans. And humans respond to experiences. And that's where John Blank comes in.
John has spent decades shaping some of the most recognizable creative work in the industry, first at agencies like Ogilvy and McCann, and as the founder of John McNeil Studio, a full-stack creative company out of Berkeley, California. John is a designer, a strategist, a storyteller, and he's helped global brands define who they are, what they stand for, and how they show up in the world. But what sets him apart is really the clarity and craft that he makes marketing and advertising with, and his vision and voice. I love your all's work. Welcome, John, to the Brand Story.
Oh, thanks, Steve. Thanks for your introduction.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I'm really excited to have you here. So let's talk a little bit just briefly about your early agency years. You just mentioned you're going to be back in California for a couple of months before we started recording.
Back in New York.
In New York, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And so you started there, I'm assuming.
I actually started in Boston.
Did you really?
Yeah, I'm originally from Boston. And through most of my college years, while I was likely studying literature to some extent, I was also trying to work as a professional musician and also working in restaurants, and kind of like cooked my way through college in a lot of ways, and found myself in Boston. I was working as an expediter as a 21-year-old, which is probably the dumbest thing you could possibly do.
That's a hard job for a 21-year-old man.
Yeah. And you're running a line of about 6 other chefs, all of whom have been to, technical cooking school, and you just happen to like busk your way into ordering them around, which didn't really work out so well. Especially if we were pushing like 350 dinners a night.
Wow.
And this kind of major restaurant. And so it was an amazing experience, but I realized that I was not cut out for that, nor music. And I also realized that to some extent, I chose 2 of the most transient professions on the planet. You know what I mean?
Like, yeah, you sure did. Man, I'm so glad to talk to you about that. You and I have similar backgrounds.
Yeah. I saw you as a guitar player.
And I worked in restaurants forever. And like formal dining, and really enjoyed it and learned a ton. And I don't know if do you know Will Guidara, the author and from 11 Madison Park? He wrote Unreasonable Hospitality.
I do. Yeah, I don't know him personally, but I do.
He was on the podcast and has become a friend. Yeah, and hospitality and service and the way you can run an agency from that point of view is really just one of my favorite topics. So I love that you have a restaurant background. I think that's
I'll tell you, it really was formative for me in that way. And at the studio at JMS, and even before at McCann, when I was at McCann, I really intentionally wanted to build kind of a library style, open plan place to work. Not so much so that nobody had an office, but really that creative work is inherently collaborative. Yeah. And creative work is actually very close to cooking on a line in a lot of ways. And in the same way where I needed to see what was happening all day from my vantage point when I was calling out tickets and making sure everything was going out looking beautiful, I can get a pretty good sense of how people are doing and if people are confused or what people need to focus on by just being able to kind of walk through the space and go get a cup of coffee. And so that definitely was, and weirdly, I mean, we still, there are so many other parallels, but anyway, suffice it to say, found myself in Boston, realizing that I was not cut out for either music or cooking. And I got an informational interview at Hill Holiday in Boston.
Oh, great.
And I wound up talking to every department. And I didn't feel like I really jibed with anyone in particular in my suit from Filene's basement that I bought. you know, trying to figure out what this, you know, corporate experience was. But then I walked into the art studio and I met Mark Alexander, who was running the art studio back in the early 90s for Hill Holiday. And, you know, he had like motorcycle boots on and he was smoking a Pall Mall filterless. And
Yeah, right.
he was hand airbrushing, retouching a photograph. And he was very kind to me. And he said, I think you might be a creative director. And I said, like, how much does that pay? I was like 22.
Just trying to find a career. Yeah.
Yeah. With like, and, and, and he said, here, like, take these programs. You know, I'd had some early experience in doing design, like wheat pasting posters for my band and things like that in New York. Take these programs and figure out how to make ads.
Yeah.
And he was really kind to me. And invariably, you know, I kept showing up and showing him things. And he says, look, I have a job. It's not a job you want, but it was shooting photostats
Yeah. Right.
for the studio. And there was something interesting because I picked the worst, most likely to be extinct job
For sure.
in the industry. And I saw all these people who were maybe a couple of years older than me, but they were walking around telling jokes, drinking coffee. And they turned out to be creatives.
Yeah.
And so began my career. And I think the thing that was really interesting about that moment in time was, you know, we advertised John Hancock and Reebok Golf and a whole host of, you know, companies. We were also advertising Lotus Notes. And Lotus Notes, this was at a time when people barely understood what email was.
Yeah.
And here you had this guy, Ray Ozzie, trying to explain to people what kind of work group collaboration could be like on a common document that in that case existed on your intranet. But really, he had designed, you know, Google Docs. He
Yeah.
designed,
I remember
you know,
Lotus Notes.
yeah, totally.
Yeah.
And it's kind of amazing application that nobody could figure out how to explain. And I remember my creative director, because I did eventually become a creative. My creative director said to me, like, you know, there might be something to this technology thing. And, you know,
Yeah. He was a
and
little right.
yeah. And, you know, it was kind of an amazing ride in that regard,
Yeah.
because I kind of got the best of both worlds. And at a very early age, I became invested in, I mean, Hill Holiday at the time was really exceptional. Still it is in some regards, but it was really exceptional. It was the heyday of their tenure as a creative company.
Man.
And I really got to work with some incredibly talented people who showed me what's possible in advertising, but also through the lens of an emerging category in advertising that still, and we can, I'm sure, get into this, still really believed in the power of building a brand.
Yeah.
And having a voice in the world.
Yeah. A lot of
And
agencies miss that, you know? I spent a lot of time talking with Kristen Cavallo from the Martin Agency, who was, you know, very passionate about making sure that the Martin Agency had a real brand for its identity instead of just existing for client work. And
yeah,
she did an incredible job at that. So to fast forward, I mean, you worked at some big name agencies. I'm so glad we delved into your origin story, because that is so cool. Like, that just makes me more excited to talk to you. And then, you know, after all this experience and working with all these really big name clients, you decide to form your own studio, and you call it a studio. And that's in like 2009. And you sort of pioneered the studio model. Can you
yeah,
unpack that a little bit for me? What made you go in that direction? You know,
yeah,
now it's like 16 years, right?
yeah. Thanks for pointing that out. Yeah, it's weird. I'm not the best at making broad, sweeping, self-promotional statements, but I think we were the first North American agency
Yeah.
to not only call ourselves a studio, but to really kind of embrace the studio model. And if you think about the history of our business, this business of creativity, you know, George Nelson in the 50s had George Nelson's studio.
Yeah.
And George Nelson's studio did a lot of work for IBM, which, funny enough, that's where I went after Hill Holiday. I went to go work at Ogilvy and Mather on IBM and got to be part of that experience at a very high level at a very young age, which was amazing in so many ways. But George Nelson's studio had this amalgam of architects and designers and filmmakers and, writers and all these folks. And they actually they weren't on rails in terms of the work that they made. They would do architectural projects. They would do environmental projects. They would do event projects.
Yeah.
They would do design projects. They would do marketing. But they actually kind of existed in opposition to the madmen of the world, because agencies were really formed out of they were agents. Like, the term agency comes from being an agent, and as an agent, you're there to procure media for your client. And over time, you added on additional services like creative or like production, where, hey, we're buying the media. We can help put the ad in the media that we purchased, whatever that looks like. And so, which is not to knock agencies, but that arc throughout the 50s and 60s, the Mad Men arc, was really this realization, this kind of brash realization, that the real power was in story.
Yeah,
and,
sure.
The story that you dropped in this very fixed media type that everyone was experiencing in a common communal way. Whereas Nelson kind of came at it from this idea, in a way, it's more closely aligned to where we are right now, which is that, like, everything that you experience is media.
Yeah.
If you go to an event, that's a media experience to some extent. It's a physical experience. If you go into the corporate offices of IBM and you sit in a chair, or you look at something hanging on the wall, how that environment is architected and designed is an intangible but very real experience that you're having.
And all of that are signals from the brand.
Exactly.
They're either intentional or they're not.
Exactly.
And I think we share this point of view, because one of my favorite quotes is, you can do whatever you want, but everything does actually matter.
Completely.
Like,
and that's why one of our the only kind of founding tenet that we have is everything is a chance to build a brand.
There you go. Yeah, that's so exciting. And I love your studio model and what JMS does and stands for. I come out of a theater background.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we formed our company, I always looked at it as a group, because I could pull in creatives and for different situations. So we've done a ton of brand experience design for, like, interiors for hospitals to make them more friendly so patients are less anxious. And that's not exactly marketing, but it is definitely brand experience. So I love how you all incorporate art and incorporate all these different disciplines into helping your clients express themselves. That's pretty unique.
Yeah. And I think, more pointedly, the reason why I decided to create a studio 16 years ago is I was coming off of being a fairly young co-chief creative officer at McCann in San Francisco on the Microsoft business. And we came in to really help, build that relationship, turn things around creatively. It was very, very large, consolidated global relationship with Microsoft, which was connected to the relationship that I had with IBM as well. But the brands couldn't be more different. And actually the time couldn't be more different, because it was at a time when 2003, 4, 5, that kind of era, where digital was emerging. And with digital, you had this very measurable, very clear, pretty unambitious metric. If you could get above a click-through rate of like 0.02%, you were doing something.
Yep.
And it only pointed to the kind of uneasy relationship that I think CFOs, executive staffs in general have with marketing and with creativity. They don't really see the value. And agencies didn't really do a good job, because they were very much on rails about making ads.
Yeah.
They didn't do a great job of articulating in a way that could translate into some kind of scientific or pseudoscientific value of why what they do is worth doing. Really, the short answer used to be like, well, we don't know how it works, but all we know is if you spend more money, it'll work better. And that's not a great recipe for success, especially when technology is building a better mousetrap. And so I realized, coming off of that it was a stupid idea to just say we're another ad agency making ads.
Yeah.
And I also realized that there's an enormous amount of power. Like one of the reasons why when we founded JMS, one of the reasons why I founded JMS as a studio was because as probably the biggest line item on the marketing budget, McCann and Microsoft at the time, we were at the end of a chain of other engagements with other creative companies. Some strategy firm was hired for go-to-market. A brand design firm was hired for identity work, and so on and so forth. Like there were all sorts of consultancies and other types of creative voices that were at work in the development of what ultimately would be like a 300-page manual that would arrive with a thud on your desk, and they would go, "Here, you got to follow this. Surprise us." And we were at the end of the chain.
Yeah.
And that to me made no sense.
It's pretty crazy.
Completely. Because actually the closer you got to the head of the business unit that owned the ultimately the results of your efforts, or to the senior leadership of a company, the more you'd have a very different kind of conversation. It would be a more expansive conversation. It would be more about like, oh, you could do something here, you could do something here. There's all sorts of things you could do. And we wanted to get closer to that.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely crucial. I mean, that's why I think you've been so successful, is because the closer you are to the decision makers, really the closer you are to the brand, to the heart of what the message is going to be. You don't get this diluted million voice brand document that you're then trying to generate original thought out of. I think that model, I'm not sure where that model came from. I've experienced it too, but it's not often that successful. It kind of takes inspiration and talent and puts it in the wrong part of the process.
I think it all comes from what we're touching on, which is this uneasy relationship that business has with creativity.
Yeah, I agree.
Business is a very, it's like faster, better, cheaper. I mean, it's one of the reasons why AI is kind of the ultimate danger to what we do, because it's perceived as faster, better, cheaper.
Yeah.
It's the ultimate faster, better, cheaper. The reality is in application, weirdly, when you think of, we do a lot of work in technology, have forever. And legacy is the worst thing you can be as a technology brand. You don't want to be part of the legacy. The weird thing is right now is that human beings are part of the legacy in the AI equation. And where enterprises are having a very hard time, and there's a moment of reckoning happening, not just within creativity, is that actually rolling out AI is proving to be incredibly expensive, incredibly difficult the larger you are as a company, and taking so much time to do it that the technology is changing and evolving more rapidly than you have to be able to implement. And the biggest sticking point, the biggest legacy in all of that are the human systems that exist within large enterprise. And what people are finding is smaller, more nimble companies are actually able to put points in the board faster using AI, in part because they aren't trying to undo the existing systems.
Yeah, I think because they're looking at it as a tool and they're integrating it faster into expressions and behaviors without throwing out everything else.
That's true.
And I think that replacement theory of AI, that I think the people who make AI are the ones that propagate that, is that it's just going to change everything, and therefore you don't need anything else anymore. We've all heard that before. And I don't think it's true. I don't think that's going to become our reality. And I sort of have a pet theory that I'm not sure anyone else subscribes to, but there's going to be such a human emotional backlash to this stuff. Like, even as you start to see all of the creative being made just flooding the internet right now, people people respond to other human beings. We're in a very emotional business. Like, we
Yeah.
respond to emotion and humanity and empathy. And I have yet to see a piece of AI that I mean, some of it's super cool and it's super useful, and you can use it in pieces of marketing. But I don't think any of it's made me feel anything yet.
Well, again, I think the act of typing something into a prompt window is a cynical act.
That's so well put, man.
And it's like, and that's not there to diminish the technology. One of the things that, like, we don't see AI as a harbinger of doom, but we also don't see AI as like the kind of catch-all. You just don't, it's not Robitussin. You don't just put
Yeah,
some tussin on it. You know what I mean?
yeah.
It's like
Good for you.
it's this phenomenally powerful tool. And yeah, if you're right, if you analyze the work that's coming out, I wouldn't call it creative because it's not particularly. A lot of it is a proof of concept.
Yeah,
And that's kind of where we're in. And actually, if you look at classic sales, it's a little bit of like, well, the proof of concept is going to make you some money. Because if you
absolutely.
go like, here's this proof of concept, contact me, I'll show you how. That's making you some money. I think if we look right now, the folks who are making real money are the systems integrators that are pivoting to help large businesses pay a lot of money to try to integrate AI where it's kind of really hard to do. And I'm off on a tangent, but I think that, like, when I go back to this notion of brand, which for years, for 16 years at least,
Yeah,
walking into client relationships and having a very close contact with CEOs, the one piece of advice that I would often get was, don't say brand.
that's nuts.
When you walk in and talk to a CEO, don't say brand.
I've heard that, and yeah, I've experienced it, but it's still nuts.
And you go, so, okay, brand is a dirty word, got it. And then it's like, and then the other side of that is, you don't have a core competency in demand. And you were asking a question around what drives all of this stuff, all the 300-page
Yeah,
manual. It goes back to that uneasy relationship between marketing and or creativity
yeah,
and business. And the weird unlock is, every single CEO that I've worked with, and many of the people that kind of round out their executive staff, or many heads of business, love creative dialogue.
yeah. They do.
They just don't want to be asked whether they like green or blue. They don't want to be asked to evaluate an ad or to choose an idea that makes them nervous. But they love expansive thinking. And the weird thing is that I think executives, and actually expansive thinking is incredibly helpful to business.
Absolutely.
And so it's like, I think executives have been trained to believe that marketing has no value, and have been trained to tell their marketers that if you don't fill pipeline, then you are not of any worth to me. And that creates this kind of descending downward spiral into only a part of the equation. And ironically, when you think about AI, things like demand, agentic marketing workflows are enormously helpful for
Oh yeah.
demand. But then it starts to make you go like, okay, how do we lay out the criteria for this? What is the new criteria for a truly, people say full stack,
Yeah.
a truly end-to-end brand, whether that's business to consumer, business to business, brand period? What does it look like? And in many ways, to your point, ultimately you have to recognize that you're selling to humans,
Yeah.
and that you want to be perceived as a business of humans. So you have to actually have kind of a voice in the world.
Yeah.
And
And
you have to,
I think now more than ever too. I agree with you completely. And
yeah.
I think now more than ever, and even more in the next several years, people are getting better and better. We're being forced to get better and better at seeing, at sensing what's authentic and what isn't. We're already good at it because we're human. some of us more than others, but that is a differentiator. Like real, authentic communication and something that rings true is an actual differentiator. And I'm thinking about a piece of your work that you all did for Marin Health, that
Mm-hmm.
Closer campaign. So,
Yeah,
by the
yeah,
way, anyone listening, please go to the JMS's site and look at, they've done work for huge companies, but they did a campaign for a healthcare organization in Marin County called Marin Health. And that campaign is inspired because it's so human.
well, thank you.
And there's a direct line from everything from the photography of the doctors in places you wouldn't usually see them to the core
Yeah.
message of Closer that is a direct line to how people feel and not what the organization might think it needs to say about itself to be successful. So I'm confident, having just looked at that work, that it worked great for the client because you're speaking to human beings.
Yeah, it is working really well. I think I really appreciate you pointing that one out. I was actually looking at that last night. I was putting a piece together and looking at that work. What's so interesting about that is also it's a good reflection. One, it sits outside of technology brand,
Yeah.
uh, which is great because we certainly aren't all that. But in a bigger way, I think it's the best articulation of the way in which we work, because we do have this point of view around a shared relationship between strategy and creative, where historically advertising agencies made a distinction between the two,
Yeah.
and we really make no distinction. And actually, to further that, we just announced that we've built a media arm for JMS. So, Sierra Hawk, who's come to run our media practice, is going to be joining Gerald Lewis and Sonia Minden on the creative and strategic side, because it's a further articulation of how we feel like this needs to be brought in a weird way at this moment of extreme stress on our industry in terms of what are we about. The fundamentals are still right. And Marin Health is a great example of that, because there was a strategic insight that was really around Marin Health, what used to be called Marin General, and nobody thought you should go to Marin General because Marin General was perceived as not a very good hospital.
Right.
This was years ago. But in fact, Marin Health is a world-class hospital. It's an exceptional hospital. And they're just over the bridge. And so instead of going to Sutter, Marin Health is in a wonderful place that is closer, get it,
Yeah.
to all the different, kind of access points of the Bay Area. Certainly Marin, but Sonoma County, closer to San Francisco than you'd think. And so there's a real practical strategic insight. But then there's actually a very emotional insight.
Yeah.
Which is, that's what you want when engaging with a healthcare professional. You want them to be closer to what your wants and needs are, closer to understanding what you're about, closer to care. Closer is a very warm and familial and engaging word in that way.
Yeah.
And what I loved about that is that Marin Health saw that, and then they allowed us to iterate. So to your point, well, how do you prove that out in a way that's more just pictures of doctors? Where
Right.
are the doctors?
Yeah, I love that.
How do you tell that story? And how do you show that Closer for Marin Health is not just about being a facility in Marin, but being, really expert world-class professionals and practitioners who are living in Marin and part of the community.
Yeah,
So,
I love that by bringing them out and shooting photographs in them unexpected places. Emotionally, what you all said with that campaign is that they're in your lives.
Yeah.
And they're there. They might be a neighbor. They're standing near you. They go the places you go. They go to the landmarks you see. And
Yeah.
they just happen to be. So really what you're saying is they're there emotionally for you.
Yeah.
And that brings us back to like what we were talking about AI. AI is not going to come up with that idea. That is a wonderfully human insight that became a strategy.
Yeah.
And then you all executed it perfectly, which is also something AI will never do.
Yeah.
Now AI is great at iterating certain things and being a tool. It's an incredible tool. But I think those sort of like very human emotional insights that people like you all are so good at doing is going to be the thing that these executives and these brands are going to need even more in the future than they ever had before. So I think it's really cool that you all are integrating that into, media and everywhere else, because the through line of where someone sees something is as important as what they see and when.
Yeah, isn't it funny? It's kind of like it goes back to, again, if you step outside, like I never knew there was such a thing as advertising. I mean,
Yeah, you didn't think about it. Right.
I grew up not really caring that much about advertising. Shocker. I don't think most people do. And advertising for most people, they see it as a thing that's in their way.
Yeah.
That they're trying to get past or put on mute in order to get to whatever content it is that they're trying to absorb. The same is true today. You look at Instagram. The shocker is I want to see pictures of my friend and his 3-year-old. I don't want to see like like an ad for hair loss or something.
Yeah, right.
Or an influencer or whatever. But yet here we are, and in a way there is this kind of like forced muscle memory with media, not unlike flipping through channels, not unlike all the other forced muscle memory that exist. But it goes back to, so then the question is like, do we want to define creativity as that? When we go to Cannes or however we,
yeah,
I'm trying to be highfalutin. When we go there, what are we celebrating? And what are they awarding? And, and also how much of what they're doing are they rearranging the deck chairs, or are they the band playing as the ship goes down? Like which metaphor carries?
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Because I think the creative companies in the future are going to be the ones that actually deeply invest with companies.
Yep.
And they try to work hard to drive transformation within those companies to do more than execute a series of ads within a campaign, but actually change the way in which these companies articulate what makes them special.
Man, I could not agree with you more on that. I think that is such an important point, and that's what you all are doing, and I believe that to my core. Like when you really want to, this is, I think, the problem with a lot of agencies or the agency model is that it's transactional. I'm going to make ads for you and I'm going to place them, and then, they're going to do X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
There's very little emotional risk to the agency and very little emotional investment by the client. But the closer you get to the client, the longer you can get a real relationship. The priority you put on actually having a real relationship can get the work to be something that's special and isn't just expressed in a series of ads.
Yeah.
And I think that is the future, because what I've seen is a lot of the history of ad agencies as I've experienced them is that they think they're cool and they know the best thing to say and how to say it, which isn't exactly, to go back to like my very strong background in hospitality. There's not a whole lot of hospitality in that. There's a lot of arrogance.
Yeah. I mean, you said a lot there. I go back to that uneasy relationship.
Yeah.
And actually, like people like Scott Galloway are doing a good job of articulating that. I mean, he said something about the idea of entrusting your company and its voice to a bunch of vaguely attractive people. Or something like that. And
I love Scott Galloway.
And it's like, he brings up a point. And then basically he said, like, and you're doing that until Google comes along and actually shows you how it's done.
Yeah.
It's that kind of thing. And it's like, you go, okay, so what are you supposed to do? Because what I disagree with there is that Google, as any good tech company, they show you how to actually execute at scale.
Yeah.
And that's a component of it. Demand generation is a component of it. Yeah. Building an agent workflow is a component of it. There's all these components. But at a humanist level, at a philosophic level, you not only need buy-in. A great client is not only a great marketing client, someone who heads marketing or the marketing team. A great client is a great CEO.
Yeah.
And you aren't going to get anywhere as a marketer if you aren't working with a great CEO who supports you and values you and properly invests and is committed over the long term as a hygiene to do that. And I've seen it firsthand. I mean, when I was like 28 years old working on IBM eBusiness, I saw Lou Gerstner turn around the world's largest hardware and software company using marketing.
Yeah.
That's what he did. This is like a guy who knew he could no longer run a company that was defined as the man in the blue suit selling mainframes. He couldn't do that. And with a whole host of efforts, he created a category. He defined that category. He created he turned around every aspect of his portfolio to fit within that category. But he also did something even more bold, where he basically created consulting services.
Yeah.
And he went from selling hardware to selling people and selling expertise.
Yeah.
And he did that through marketing. And he created the market. He never would have been able to turn the company around toward that had he not actually, like, literally created this service offering, promoted it, and generated a market that was undeniable to his culture, such that it would change a sales focused culture and make them more consultative.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Amazing.
I mean, and so much of that, any good CEO, any really great marketer, I mean, what he did, and he was a genius, is, he had so much storyteller in him.
Yeah.
And the story he told, whether it was internal or external, was, there was a through line to it, and the destination and a belief, and it was emotional, and people bought in, and he sold it to the marketplace through the same methods. And I think that modern brands, with all the different ways to express themselves and all the channels, have to realize that their story better ring true, and also have a strong through line. And the CEOs that get that, I think, are going to be massively successful. The ones that don't, that are just transactional, I think are going to run into a lot of problems. So you guys are doing, I want to make sure we get a chance to talk about a couple things before. I don't want to take your whole day. I have a feeling I could talk to you for like 2 hours, so I'm going to make sure I don't do that.
I'm long-winded too.
No, man, you're a blast to talk to. I'm having a great time. You guys are launching something called John Blank.
Yeah.
And it's so cool, and it's very experiential. Can you describe it to me? Because it is unusual. I don't think I've certainly never seen an agency do it quite this way, or get into the brand experience space the way you are. But it's very unique what you're doing. And I think it comes from, you guys do these sort of like I don't know how often you do them, but you do these like art pop-ups in your actual studio with your internal culture. And I don't know how those things connect. Do they? Like, did that inspire this John Blank thing at all?
I mean, Steve, actually, in some ways, yes, in some ways, no. But I think it goes back to our shared history in restaurants.
Okay.
When we were starting out, I loved that I had 50, 60 or so people that I could make dinner for, and one of the and a number of people, a number of the early employees and people like that also came from restaurant backgrounds.
Yeah.
And so we would do a thing called Thursday Supper. And Thursday Supper, as we grew larger, became Thursday Social, because it was tough when we were at our largest. And then the pandemic hit. It's been a whole arc of things. But that experience, that really tangible experience, not only helped solidify our own culture as a company, but also when we would invite clients, or when we would invite, we have a thing in our lobby called Limited Edition, which is really about like a single artwork made by a local artist installing the work for a period of time. And it's like a little mini art opening that we've done over the years. And so we try to do these things that have been nipping at the corners of experience, not only then also having our own experience practice for clients, where at major events like RSA here in San Francisco, or whenever we go off and do, big things in Las Vegas, we do have an experience practice. Yeah. And one of the things that has always been important to me, whether it's in B2C and direct to consumer, but also in B2B, is finding a way to have brands, companies, actually have access to the public in an experiential way. And especially when you look at direct to consumer, um, that ability is fallen away just because it's cost prohibitive.
Right.
You can't be a successful direct to consumer company without pumping millions of dollars a year into Instagram and TikTok and other, sites that are your platform to generate growth. That is your pipeline.
Yeah.
And yet, if you talk to any direct to consumer brand, they would say the one thing that they really need is a physical location. And the one thing everyone on their team says, we need to do a pop-up. Well, the reality is a pop-up could be $1 million proposition.
Easily.
And it only goes up for like a week.
Very expensive.
Yeah.
Because
you got to negotiate with, whatever leasing agent or real estate person it is. You got to do a short-term lease. You got to do a build. You got to go find a production company to do it. Maybe you're hiring an agency to come up with the concept. It's a lot of layers. You got to figure out how to staff it.
Yeah.
You got to figure out how you're putting on a show.
Yeah.
And it's costly. And so, all these things kind of happened coming out of the pandemic. I thought a lot. And I thought, really, we kind of believe three things. I'm sure we'll touch on the other two. But like right now, coming out of the pandemic, it's a few things. My point about media.
Yeah.
That media needs to be critically integrated into the creative and strategic process. It's a point about social, which is really everything is social, meaning everything is a two-way experience. That doesn't mean that you suddenly just have to be on TikTok and Instagram and other social channels, LinkedIn, but more and more, the idea of actually tapping into a highly vertical targeted audience in a two-way manner needs to be thought through and invested in by companies. And it's not enough to just put schlock up there.
Yeah.
For our earlier point around LinkedIn doom scrolling, you actually need to kind of major on that and not ignore it. And then the final thing, and I think the most important thing, is at a time when everyone's like, I'm not going to invest in brand TV spots. I'm not brand's a dirty word. Well, the reality is experience is the new brand. Like that at the end of the day, what you're trying to do, and you said it really well, is you're trying to connect with humans.
Yeah.
And humans respond to experiences. And that's where John Blank comes in. And what John Blank is a bit of a Swiss Army knife for brands, because on the one hand, it is going to be think of it as a 3D billboard, where it's a public-facing kind of retail-like space that is in the heart of Hayes Valley, right across from the original Blue Bottle Coffee and 2 doors down from the new Rivian Experience Center.
That's a great location.
It's a fabulous location. It's just large enough for a direct-to-consumer brand to do something amazing, but also for a company like Google or a company like Adobe or a company that is a large-scale enterprise company to also do something amazing. It has an exterior part of the design is about actually allowing the brand to do kind of an exterior takeover so that there's an exterior advertising component. It's got this fabulous empty box that allows for an art installation and experience. But then it has a deeper space where it can open out into being a long gallery. It can be a space for dinner events, and it can also be a space for, brand lab, brand innovation work, brand strategy work, where you can actually connect in with the public and do research. And finally, it has a full service production facility for podcasting and so forth. So maybe next time you and I talk,
man, that'd be great. We have to do this again, because I think we are kindred spirits, man. I'm having such a blast talking to you about this. The John Blank idea is fascinating and it's inspired. Like, I cannot wait to see how it goes, because you see plenty of brands do pop-ups, but they tend to be at festivals with certain audiences in certain situations. Having a lab like that to be able to experiment, and just the possibilities from everything from brand research to testing products to learning about your audience. I love how you've connected. You're really just connecting the dots of being able to have brand expressions and learn about the humans that are going to experience and love or interact with whatever particular brand uses the space. That's a really, really adventurous, cool thing that you guys are doing. I'm just fascinated by it.
It goes back to the two-way point. You know what I mean? Like, it's another way to have dialogue,
Yeah.
and which connects into that social point. And I think that, for us, we started it as a wouldn't it be great to do something like this
Right.
in Hayes Valley? But as we've developed it, and we've partnered with Envelope AD, which is a phenomenal architecture firm, and Douglas Burnham is a close friend of mine, um, we see it actually as a really interesting model to scale.
Yeah.
Because my plans for it is, well, one, we're going to launch in late fall of this year, and we're having conversations with brands and building out all the things you need to do when you're launching a new venture. But my plan for it is actually to have it be a membership model,
That's cool.
and to actually have, in talking to heads of experience in different brands, what I'm hearing more than anything else is they don't need a massive space. They need something predictable, affordable. They need something in surprising locations, but in more than one place in the country, more than one place around the world. And so, to be super ambitious, the idea really is to figure out, how do we actually build a model that, if your point about pop-ups, I put it into kind of like two buckets. Either it's something where it's like, we're bootstrapping something, we'll figure out how it's going to do.
Yep.
It's going to be imperfect, but it's going to be fun, and we'll make it. And
it's
so
going to be
forth.
there. Yeah.
Yeah, it's going to be there. And so that's tough. That's tough for brands. It's tough to actually show the ROI in that. It's tough to justify. Or you're Pharrell Williams and Louis Vuitton.
Yeah.
And you do something that is just fucking outstanding. Right. And no one would have the money or the tolerance to be able to kind of go through something like that.
Right.
It's like jaw-droppingly great.
Yep.
And in my mind, I kind of feel like there might be a middle.
I think there might be. I really hope that man, I cannot wait to see the first iterations and how you and where and when you scale it, because I think you guys are really onto something with that. I think that's fascinating. So congratulations in advance, and I'm going to stay in touch with you just so I can see how that goes, because I'm like deeply fascinated by what you're doing. So let me ask you some closing questions, just so that I'll get you out of here in under an hour. We've kind of touched on this with the John Blank and how you've really started to integrate and hire some new people to expand what you're doing.
Yeah.
But what's the future look like for you right now? What are you looking for the next couple of years? What's your forward looking sort of on your radar right now?
For me, a few things. One thing I did was I solidified and announced a leadership team that extends beyond me.
Yeah.
But all of these people are kind of either came up through JMS or people that I've known for a very long time and have a shared career experience. Part of what that does is it allows JMS to operate as its own entity. I've always been really, I'm halfway okay with the acronym. I'm not okay with John McNeil Studio. I'm not it was something that was, I was urged to do it, and I'm really glad that I did. But I think my personal feeling is that the S is the most important part of JMS. And it's the collection of people that we have that do such wonderful work, which means that the onus is on me to do just kind of what we're doing right now, which is to be more actively involved in the dialogue, to build my advisory in a lot of ways, to have closer conversations with people who are, certainly senior marketers, but also executives in business, and see where this notion of creativity applied more broadly and everything is a chance to build a brand can lead us. I think John Blank is going to be a huge opportunity for that, because while certainly from a pop-up standpoint, that's a very easy transactional. I get what you're doing and I want some.
Yeah, right.
That's great. But I think the things that are more excited are like some of the work that we've done. Sorry, we're right by the train in Berkeley.
Yeah, that's great.
But some of the work that we've been doing in the innovation space, which is really about, like, one of my favorite strategy firms years ago was Stone Yamashita, SY Partners. And what I loved about them is that they actually really valued the power of executives within the company coming to a place, coming to their place and doing kind of an intensive 2-day strategy effort, and actually bringing real attention to detail in terms of what the space is like, what the design is like, how the as people had insights, how they were manifested in design and brought together in the form of something that actually gave these ideas that people were having more importance and credibility. And so I see, again, we called it a Swiss Army knife. The idea of a brand lab, I think, is a really powerful thing that certainly can be tied to pop-up, but actually is would be more beneficial as part of how I see the larger growth and impact of JMS. Because what I think is great about a blank space for brands is that really fundamentally that's what most brand marketers need. We're so bogged down in terms of, MarTech and meetings and dialogue and events and speaking engagements and podcasts that there isn't a moment to actually think of a large enterprise more like a small business.
Yeah, which we need.
And, you do, because really at the end of the day, you think about, like, you go back to your why is that, the 300-page manual. Like, if you look at demand generation, like, you ask a simple question, why aren't we generating pipeline? And you get like an algebraic answer that makes you go, what are we doing again?
You get an algebraic answer when you need a human one.
Yeah, because really it's like, what's the offer?
Yeah.
And how are we actively engaging with people?
And whose lives are we improving? What are we doing for them? And why would they even care?
Exactly.
Which is crazy. That's a question that still needs to be asked, but it needs to be asked all the time.
So it's, without being too ambitious, I feel like the future for me is really promoting the value of what the studio does, because I think we're a unique model.
Yeah, you are.
And really also figuring out ways in which, if we are a studio because we're about change, like you mentioned your experience in the theater. In my mind, one analog was George Nelson's studio. The other analog was Hollywood.
Yeah.
Which is, usually Hollywood studios are a couple of people. Production companies are a couple of people, not the big studios.
Yeah, right.
Production companies are a couple of people. And they go, like, I got a good idea. What about a Western?
Yeah.
And if it's a Western, you go find someone who knows how to ride a horse.
Right.
And you find a trick shooter. But the core people
stay the same.
Are staying the same.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's a heist film, or it's a musical, or whatever. Well, it's about forming expertise around kind of core strategic and creative thinking.
Yeah, which takes a sort of nimbleness of mind, and spirit and intention that I think a lot of agencies don't have. And I think you all do. And I think it's that takes a lot of courage and a lot of passion and a lot of ability to really communicate with others, to be able to pull together those kinds of expertise and get great results.
Yeah.
So I think that's one of the reasons you guys are doing such incredible work. We are definitely going to have to come back and do this again, because this was a blast. I'm gonna ask you a couple really quick closing questions. Sure. Then I'm going to let you out of here. And we'll talk a moment after I finish recording. But man, we've got to do this again, because you're just fascinating to talk with. I've had an absolute blast today.
It's been a conversation.
You're an entrepreneur. You've been an entrepreneur for a long time. I love asking this question of entrepreneurs. Where's the line between fear and adventure for you?
I think fear fuels adventure. And, like people talk about resilience as being a critical trait in business and in life. And it's true, it is. But fear is what motivates you in many ways. And resilience is the outcropping, it's the retrospective outcropping of the fear that motivated you, to get out and go do it, the adventure that you had along the way, and then the proof that you made it through.
I love that. That's such a great answer. Um, so 2 more questions, then I'll let you go. What would you name, we kind of touched on this, but what would you name this chapter of your life right now?
Oh, boy. Um, there's the musician part of me kind of goes, well, I still haven't made my album.
Right.
And then you go, well, what would you title it? And I'm over 50, I'm 54. And my title was always The Last Half. But in many ways, I think with some distance, because that is a little bit of a, like, you know, there's a good and a bad to that,
Yeah,
that
right.
title. What I think is that this chapter of my life is, I think, driven by a reminder that the best part of myself is can operate in the service um, of being a benefit of some degree of magnanimity. I think when you're younger, you have this tenacity. I certainly did, this competitive tenacity that never sat well with me, because in my mind, I'm a shitty basketball player, so I'm going to be competitive, executionally, intellectually, creatively, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And none of those disciplines are actually about isolating yourself or about outmaneuvering people.
Yeah. Or personal accomplishment even.
Yeah, it's actually about band of brothers. It's
Yeah.
actually about forging something together. And so, being at this point in my life, there's a lot of potential wonderful things ahead. I'm at the top of my game in terms of having had really great experiences and really great mentors who, some of whom are alive and some of whom aren't, and who I think about every day. And I feel like they, in some way, count on me to do right. And then I see, the great opportunity I have with the company I've built,
Yeah.
to be able to be that to somebody else. And then somewhere in the middle, there's the satisfaction I have to work with partners and do things that I'm excited about. And so it's a wonderful time at this moment in my life.
Yeah. What a beautiful answer. Thank you for that. That was an absolutely beautiful answer. I love that. It was very rich. So last question, I will let you go. Sort of looking back, what advice would you give to your younger self if you could talk to that guy right now? What would you say to your younger self?
Calm down. um,
Yeah, calm down.
yeah, well, I have my son said to me that he took a year off from college. He's a junior at Wyatt, and he said, I think it's really interesting. I think you just think about that generation of kids right now, and I worry about people who are interns here at JMS. I worry about recent graduates.
Yeah.
Because I do think that they're under intense pressure to figure out who they are pretty rapidly.
They are.
And Wyatt told me, he's like, I need to figure out some things and experience life. And he went and lived with his friends and got a job at a restaurant,
Yeah.
things like that. But he said, like, I want to learn Spanish. He's a good Spanish speaker. I want to go to Spain and study Spanish. And then he called me up and he said, I looked at his location. He was in Paris. I said, what happened to Spain? He said, well, I had a thought. And he's in Paris and he had saved up some money. He's like, I'm not paying for it. He's saved up money, and he's figuring it out in a way that I really admire.
Yeah.
Because he's not like, I know he is worried about what he's going to do with his life, but I think that he is off on an adventure, back to that whole idea of fear or adventure.
Yeah.
That in spite of the fear that he probably has about his future, he's going back to Wesleyan in a couple of months. And it's like, he has traveled all over Europe, and he has gone to all these historic sites. He loves history, and and loves food, and he's cooked, and he's like Stanley Tucci, only younger with hair. And he's going around, and I'm hearing, as I talk to him, the things that he's discovering.
Yeah.
And I think that, so I do think that calm down is not a bad way to play it.
Wow. I have to agree with you, man. Like, I'm glad he's doing that. And I think anytime I talk to somebody like you and we start talking about like a message to younger self, I always realize what a great message it is to us today. Like, the experiences we have and the people we talk to and the pause we take in the world is who we are.
Yeah.
That fuels what we do next. It's like every moment like that is connected. So calm down. I think I'll take that the rest of the day with me. And I love it. So John, thank you so much for being with me today and having this conversation. I can't tell you how much I enjoyed it, sincerely. It was great.
Thanks, Steve. It was a pleasure.
Yeah. It was really fun. So thank you for being here. And the audience that's listening out there, please go to JMS Studio, check out their website, follow John's work. What they're doing is truly exceptional. It's not what you would expect, and it's pretty damn original. So I'm really a big fan of what you guys are doing. Want to hear more inspiring stories? Subscribe on your preferred podcast app so you don't miss an episode. And if you like what we're doing, please rate, review, and share. It's the best way to support us. Thank you for listening to Brand Story.